everybody. What you're going to find here, we're going to be doing a little bit of a longer video. This is going to be by Dratnos. He's going to be giving us 11 rants about the current state of World of Warcraft, things that could be fixed. I find this really interesting, and I wanted to do a video on it because he hit some really, really good points. So let's discuss and see what it's all about. And thank you for being here.
Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos. Usually I try and keep a pretty balanced perspective on WoW. Sometimes I get called out for being a little bit of a shill, a little bit of a positive spin on things that sometimes the community is reacting negatively to. But in today's video, I've condensed a bunch of things that irritate me all into one video. So we're going to go on a few different rants here about things that, I guess from a glass half full perspective, a lot of these would be easy slam dunk wins if Blizzard were to fix them. That's the positive spin on some of these. So let's start off with the first one. The first thing I want to complain about is aggro. Aggro being an issue is something that makes sense in a game like this. It's often been over the course of the game's history, especially going back to Classic, aggro was a big deal. And then after Legion, aggro was at a pretty low point in terms of how hard it was to hold threat as a tank. And that led to there being some polls where your tank would run in, you'd have Dancing Rune Weapon up because you were playing a Blood DK, and you would you'd get threat, you get a bunch of threat, and then you'd just run, and you'd just kite out the pack until it ended. And Blizzard, I think, correctly looked at that and were like, okay, we don't want that. And they nerfed tank threat. And then since then, they buffed it a little bit, but we are still at a point in the game where depending on the tank spec you're playing, the gear you have, your skill level with the tank, and crucially the DPS that you're playing with, holding on to threat can be something where you can be doing a reasonable job, you can be having no intention of kiting the pack, and if you're playing like a Vengeance Demon Hunter, for instance, there have been some bugs associated with this, although most of those have been fixed, and even unbugged, you can still be dropping threat while mostly doing the correct rotation, being on a similar item level if you're playing with something like a Devastation Evoker, like some melee DPS specs, even if they're hitting the same target as you as well. So what should aggro be? Well, I think aggro being something that tells you, hey, don't kite too much, right? Like if you kite, aggro is going to be a problem that you'll have to solve, or something that somebody might rip threat on. And also being on pull, where it's like, okay, if you're trying to tag in, 10 different mobs from different places, right? You're running in here, and you want to get all of these all together in one pull, then that's something where, okay, maybe aggro can be an issue for you, and that's fine. But if you are pulling all these mobs together, your DPS wait a little bit, you get them all grouped up, you're hitting all of them, you're in melee with them, and then your DPS start doing damage, and then 30 seconds later they rip threat on you on one of the mobs. That's an extremely frustrating situation that luckily doesn't happen all that much to me. My tanks are extremely geared. I have a pretty good handle on holding threat on these different things, and also just laughing at my DPS players when they die. But this is one of the extra barriers to entry to becoming a tank that I think doesn't need to exist, isn't a particularly fun thing. And in particular, I think that if you're in melee with mobs and you're hitting them, you shouldn't be dropping threat as a tank like that. It should be reserved for when you're out of range. So what could Blizzard do to fix this? Well, they already have a system in the game that's called the melee threat multiplier, where if I'm in melee with a mob, somebody else is going to need to get a higher amount of threat to rip threat from me than if I'm not in melee with the mob. That could be tuned up further, or potentially having the range associated with it increase from straight up in melee to maybe up to 10 yards or something like that. I think it could still be kind of unsatisfying there. For me, I'd rather see them take a look at the specific specs that are ripping threat from tanks this season and apply further threat and multiplier reductions to them. Devastation Evoker, even though they rip threat a bunch, actually already have some threat multiplier reductions on abilities like Fire Breath. Doing some more of that to abilities like Engulf, like Pyre for them could help as well. And I think also some threat multiplier increases to tank abilities that you use in melee could be appropriate as well. So like if I throw Glaive a mob, I don't think I should get a huge amount of threat. If I put a Sigil of Flames under a mob, this shouldn't give me a huge amount of threat, although it should probably do a little bit more than it currently does. But if I'm in melee with a mob and it's taking damage from my Immo Aura and it's taking damage from my Soul Cleaves, I think those abilities could have double the threat that they currently do associated with them, and that would go a long way towards fixing that problem. So that's problem number one, rant number.
And I find that that's one of the things also was in the very beginning, vanilla, they used to have these add-ons, believe it or not, that you would download. It was called a threat meter. So I used to play a hunter back then, and I used to have to watch my threat so that the boss wouldn't get pulled. And you would watch this threat meter, and you'd try and make sure that if you had to back off your DPS, that's exactly what you did. The same thing maybe should be applied here in the War Within, where if those, I have yet to actually go and see if there are any around, you might have to go back to using a threat meter to make sure that you're not using too much damage on that one particular mob. You know, I like a lot of things I like to do when my tank goes in, I'll wait. I'll count to like 3 or 5, then I'll go in and I'll start blasting. Also, when my tank starts kiting, I start making sure that I get off of the mob that I'm currently hitting, and I'll charge into maybe the new bomb that he goes to try and make sure that I'm starting to apply my damage there to reduce the threat that I have on the mob that I was hitting previously. It still happens. I'm not gonna lie. You'll still see mobs going after you, and then what you try and do is take it back into by where the tank is, and it could be a little hairy. Definitely something that I like to see, and I appreciate Dratnos here because he knows a lot about the game. The threat multiplier, I believe, is one of the things they need to work on for certain classes to try and reduce the threat that these certain abilities of a Ret Pally, for instance, have, so that you're not pulling so much threat on everything. But usually the way to try and combat this at the moment is to wait, so that you're not causing the death, because at 12 key and above, you're losing 15 seconds now for every death across the board for everybody, you know, for every person that dies. And with a tight timer, you don't want to have these things happen.
Number 1. All right, rant number 2, the AoE cap. I'm sure you expected this to be somewhere in this video. In Shadowlands, Blizzard AoE capped a bunch of classes. They put a bunch of classes on these hard target caps of 5, or in some cases 8 targets, and they largely backed off of that after it really sucked, down to just a few specs that are still in the game that have hard caps at 5 targets. And it still really sucks for those people. If you are somebody like a Fury Warrior, for instance, that is hard capped to 5 targets, it's not that you can't succeed in, say, High Mythic Plus as a Fury Warrior. It's just if you are the top 1 Fury Warrior in the world, you'll be able to replicate what the top 700 Moonkins in the world are able to do by rolling their face across the keyboard and hitting the Starfall button and hitting all the mobs by carefully selecting these routes with a perfectly crafted comp that optimizes your spec and fights 5 good targets at a time. And I just think that it's a outdated concept to have the AoE cap if we're not actually going to let the specs that are hard capped at 5 be really great at 5, because as it stands right now, specs like Fury, like, they're good at 5 targets, but they're not great. They're not that much better than, you know, the Moonkins, the Mages, or whatever that are uncapped, and you're watching them, the Unholy DKs, do great damage on 5 targets, and then do twice your damage or triple your damage on 10 targets, on 15 targets. Is there an argument that, hey, maybe people shouldn't be pulling that many targets? I mean, yeah, Blizzard kind of thought that argument, but then when they first implemented the AoE cap, they didn't AoE cap everybody. If that's actually what you think, you should AoE cap everybody. And if that's not what you think, and what you instead think is, hey, we want some specs to have a niche of big AoE, and some specs to have a niche of small cleave, then how about actually letting the specs that have that small cleave niche be best at those niches? Because as it stands right now, Blizzard has often had seasons where the specs that are uncapped are great at all target counts, but they've really not yet had a season where there's been a target capped spec and you're like, yeah, I might be target capped, but at least I'm doing twice the Moonkins damage on 5 targets. That's never come close to being true, but there's been so many seasons where the Moonkins are doing twice your damage on 10 targets. So either actually adhere to that philosophy of the AoE cap, or just take it away from the specs that still have it, and it doesn't have to be fully. Soft caps on 7 are fine, soft caps on 8 are fine, which turns out those specs work out just fine. You know, they're a little bit less likely to be good every season than the completely uncapped specs, but at least it's not as bad as being hard capped at 5 like Fury and a couple of other specs still are in the game. Up next, it's of course Valor Stones. My question is, what are these?
Now, one of the things that I also find that's funny about that is that, like he said, they tried to cap everybody, and then they still left a couple of specs that were not target capped. Well, one of the things that now they have is the soft cap for 7, 8, and 5. But meanwhile, you still have the Boomkin, the Warlocks, your Mages. It just seems like every other class that is like a caster, for instance, they don't have these AoE caps. They really need to look at this so that we could try and move through the dungeons faster, and you're not feeling held back. Held back like a Fury Warrior is not fun. It's a very good class. I really enjoy Fury. But one of the things that everybody sees is that Warrior has a cap. When you're putting your group together and you are listing your own key, I'd like to hear down in the comments, what are your classes that you're looking for that you know are going to be able to do the maximum damage, because number one, you might be looking at how much cap they have for the mobs that your tank will be pulling. Now, if you've been running Mythic Plus since the very beginning, then you know that the meta for these MDI routes and everything, they will adjust throughout the season based on gear, based on knowledge, based on your MDT route. And these things here are going to be a real big play, especially when you're trying to learn. So you guys that are down there in the 2 through 7 really need to try and look at these videos and find out what it is beneficial for you. There's another guy that I want to do another video on, talking about how bad it is for the lower realm of Mythic Plus, trying to figure out these things. And maybe that's another topic that he'll bring up. But you have to try and really maximize your damage for the time, because the timer is always what you want to beat. And having caps is something that is like so 2019. I'm just saying.
Accomplishing by still being in the game, because from my experience, all of my characters tend to basically either not care about Valor Stones because they have enough, or they're at 0 Valor Stones, even though when I woke up this morning, they had 2,000 Valor Stones. Warrior's a great example of this, because, you know, sometimes you get two-handers to upgrade, and that's super Valor Stone intensive. But even other than that, I think a lot of people experienced this during the Turbo Boost, where they had a character that was capped at 2,000 for months. And then the Turbo Boost came out, and all of a sudden they're out of Valor Stones, and they're looking at my guide videos of how to actually farm up more Valor Stones efficiently. Which I guess, on the one hand, it's, you know, it makes sense if there's activities that Blizzard wants to incentivize in the game, making them the good sources of Valor Stones. But on the other hand, they keep buffing these sources of Valor Stones that are also the sources of crests, right? Which, in my opinion, if you have the crest to upgrade something, you know, you've earned those crests. You either earned the Valor Stones as well, or you should have earned the Valor Stones as well, and Blizzard is just under-rewarding Valor Stones from whatever content you're getting the crests from, or you were earning the Valor Stones, but you were earning them against this comically low cap of 2,000 Valor Stones, which isn't even enough to fully upgrade a two-handed weapon all the way up its upgrade track. So Blizzard either should think about Valor Stones and be like, okay, yeah, we would like Valor Stones to come from these specific activities that we want to push players to do, and so this is the source of Valor Stones, and then these are the sources of crests, and hey, go and do these Valor Stones things if you want Valor Stones. I think people wouldn't like that, but I think that's better than the sort of half measure that they're doing right now with it, where that's sort of surreptitiously what they're saying, and then you can maybe get around it. Or two, the cap of 2,000 is just a crazy cap to me. Like, what is the damage that would be done if there was a cap of 5,000 instead of 2,000? Would people be hoarding Valor Stones, or, you know, not spending their upgrades and just continuing to run content? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a case where people have 2,000 Valor Stones and they're thinking, yeah, you know, I wouldn't want to spend these Valor Stones, but I guess since I'm at the cap of 2,000, I'll use these. Like, no, everybody's upgrading when they've got the good upgrades to do with Valor Stones, and it just sucks when you hit the 2,000. Maybe you look at your gear and you're like, oh, I guess I can actually upgrade this, but usually people are just going to send those upgrades anyways, so I don't think there's any bad behavior that people, any hoarding or something that you're going to do, which is usually the reason that those sorts of caps are put in place. And if the cap just went up to something like 5,000, then at least when you get 2 upgrades in the same reset, which can happen very easily, right? You take an upgrade out of your vault, it's Tuesday, and then you go raid, and then all of a sudden your character gets an upgrade or 2, and now your 2,000 Valor Stones are not going to go very far. So raise the cap, increase the amount of sources that they come from, or just delete the damn things, because, again, everything that drops crests, I think, should also drop Valor Stones. So then what's the point of having the Valor Stones as well as the crests? Just let people get the upgrades that they've earned with their crests, and, you know, have Valor Stones, I don't know, be for cosmetic, wrap them into the Resonance Crystal system instead, and have Resonance Crystals be your cosmetic thing, and buy stuff with that. But I think Valor Stones definitely do not need to exist anymore.
That's a great point. I was going to say exactly that. But my other point will be this. Blizz, for the love of Pete, just get rid of caps. There are so many people that love and enjoy their alts. If you were really out here looking at the numbers of people that really play one character throughout the whole season, and only one, I might be one of the few, then you'll find that even me, I start playing my alts when I can't really get much else for my main. Whether it be me trying to push more score, or me trying to make sure that I have every vault option available to me at the end of that week, to make sure that I don't have, I'll get on this other point in a little bit, but to make sure that I just fill up all the options that I have. Just remove Valor Stones entirely. Like he said, put them into another currency, make them into your resonance crystals so you can get some of those T-Mogs that you're pushing so much. You know, it's great. Everybody's buying into your system for T-Mog. They want all of it. You know, they want to look different than every other player that's out there. Roll it into that, because when it really comes to your crusts are capped at 90. Remove that all the time. Don't have that in the game, because if anything, as you're leveling up in every beginning of the season, you want to use your crust so that you're even low, you know, you're upgrading the lower stuff so that you could get that power to help your group. So if you could do that, that would be amazing. One of the things that I always do, especially when there is a cap, is I'll go ahead and I'll start using my rune carved or weathered, and I'll start upgrading all of those so that they become gilded. And then before the day is done, I am maxed out on all of my gilded, because I'm still running my 7 or above Mythic Plus, and I'm capped. And then I don't have gear really to use them on, because I'm also capped on all of that. So I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and I really don't want to play anymore because I'm just so bored. I don't see any numbers going up. You know, my group isn't doing that great, so I'm not getting any IO. We're completing the dungeon and we're timing it, but I'm still not getting any Valor Stones or Crest. Get rid of the Valor Stones. Just use your Crest system. You need those to upgrade anyways. And let's move past the sticking point, so then I can maybe go and start enjoying all the rest of my alts. There's a lot of people out there that have 5 to 7 alts fully geared, where I really like to try and help the community, and we run the Mythic Plus at the key level you need, and we try and make sure that you have your vault filled so you get a good opportunity for that week at the Great Vault. Now the Great Vault, let's work on that, because this BLP, the bad luck protection system that you have for your vault, is total dog shit. Dog shit. I opened up my vault on reset day. I had 3, not just 2. Not only that, but I had 5. I have 5. 1, 2, 3. I had 6. Sorry, 6. Max myth track, and I got 3 boots, 1 chest, and a trinket that I didn't even need, because it's not fists for my guys, and I already got those. It's just work on the BLP system, please, because it's got to be better than what it is, especially since I'm wearing best in slot 684 boots. I mean, help me, and players like us.
Next rant, it's the Mythic lockout system. This is another thing where it's a relic of the game from before. So Mythic Raid used to be a special, place that you would go into with only your guild, with your preset group of players. Back when cross-realm raids worked, cross-realm Mythic didn't. And that was something that opened up midway through the season, usually after the Hall of Fame filled up. Blizzard have eased off on that restriction, but they continue to keep the outdated system of Mythic saving you to a specific instance ID rather than to bosses. So if I have this heroic lockout here, I can go and join anybody else's heroic that's on Cauldron of Carnage, or Rick Reverb, or even the bosses I've already killed, even Vexy, or One Armed Bandit, or Mugsy. I could go do those bosses on heroic if I extended this lockout and just not get loot from them. But with Mythic, if I extended this lockout, if I had this lockout active, I am locked to this specific instance ID, and I can't queue up with anybody else, even somebody else who has the exact same set of bosses defeated. I can't do Mythic with that person, which means if you have a guild that, you want to go help them out, kill some Mythic bosses, you are committing your entire character's Mythic week on that guild. If you're pugging Mythic Raid, and the raid kills Vexy and the Gear Grinders, then all of a sudden you can't kill Cauldron of Carnage. Well, too bad. That raid is going to fall apart. One person can hearth out of that pug raid, and then all of a sudden you have 19 people in there. Nobody's going to want to join because of this lockout system. If that lockout system didn't exist, you could maybe fill somebody back in and fight Cauldron of Carnage, and that would be good. And then everybody else could get their 2 box, and then whoever got that save to just Cauldron of Carnage could go back and get Vexy with another group, or maybe you'd even reset and get them that Vexy kill to help them out after you've done Cauldron of Carnage, something like that. Could this lead to some problems, like in Heroic, where, maybe sometimes people join just for the first boss and then leave, and that's kind of cringe? Yeah, but you could just fix it the same way as you do in Heroic, where now you refill the group. Blizzard have said, they want to keep Mythic being this feeling of, being an exclusive hard difficulty mode, but I really think that that's already accomplished by how hard the bosses are, and the lockout system working the way that it does right now creates this really awkward situation where if you have the boss difficulty curve the way that it looks in Liberation of Undermine, some people are heavily encouraged to sneak out the back door of the hotel, which for some reason doesn't have a firewall up. And if that didn't exist, it would be an absolute nightmare to pug Mythic. But almost all the Mythic pugs now do that because you really want to fight the harder bosses first, so that then when you get people saved, you then go and do the easy boss. And that works out really well. And you actually don't have somebody leave after killing the easy boss and then not being...
I didn't get to hear any of that because I was muted. So I'll try and edit this back in, but one of the things that I did like about what he was saying about the Mythic is, if you heard me, I had to correct myself because I said that I was at 5 in my vault, but in fact I was 4, and I was only 4 because I had 3 of 4 bosses for that Mythic part of the vault. If they remove this, it would be a great point for us to try and get ahead and go ahead and do it like a Heroic Hug, where you go ahead and you move through the rest of it and you start going with other groups to see if you could get that last boss that you might need for your second box in your top row of Mythic for the raid. That's one of the things that it's so old. They've had this in the game since the beginning of Mythic. And when he says that it's about the 1% or the race to world first, that's why I believe they're not looking at this correctly. They're looking at one piece of the pie and letting that have the ear and thinking about their needs, and then not the rest of the needs for the rest of the community, making their one piece of the pie affect the whole pie. And that is something that really needs to be addressed, because I am tired of not being able to look for a Mythic and always having to go back into Heroic just to have a chance at something that, if anything, I pick up that I could use in an off spec, because I'm probably don't need anything more from that raid or AOTC type of guild that requires. What I'm saying is I'd rather get the gear for off specs and maybe just get the Valor Stones or the runes, Rune Crest, Gilded Crest off the last 2, things like that.
Actually all that scary, and it's a lot of fun, and maybe I'll try and join a Mythic Progression Guild instead next year. That could be something that would really help people get into that ecosystem, so I feel like that would be a very good change they could make. Next rant here about the kick change. So this was a controversial change that they put into the game recently, where when a mob has a cast, if you stop the mob, it doesn't go on cooldown anymore. Now, for the history of dungeons in the game, generally that hasn't been true. Generally, if you stun a mob, it will not recast whatever it was casting when that stun ends. But Blizzard have made some good arguments of like, yeah, hey, for consistency's sake and not making stuns and AoE stops, the meta for M+, we want to make them less powerful. So they're not actually gonna stop the cast anymore. They're just gonna temporarily stop it, and then the mob's gonna start their cast again as soon as they come off the stun. Unfortunately, that's actually not what has happened. Stuns and AoE stops have become more powerful rather than less, as a pack has gone from needing one AoE stop to stop all of its casts to now needing constant AoE stops if you want to stop those casts from going through, because otherwise the mobs are just going to recast. This has also led to the effect of Sigil of Silence and Solar Beam, mostly, although technically Warrior can do this as well with Disrupting Shout. It's a little bit more costly to talent this. These effects that actually AoE kick end up being super duper OP, because when you think about something like a Shockwave, a Shockwave is going to stun mobs for 2 seconds, and it's going to stop their cast for however late into that cast bar you go, plus the 2 seconds of the stun. Whereas something like an AoE kick, a Disrupting Shout, a Sigil of Silence, a Solar Beam, are actually going to be able to potentially stop multiple enemies for 10, 15 seconds, however long it puts that spellcast on CD. So I don't think that was intentional. I don't think that making Sigil of Silence and Solar Beam more OP was an intended part of this plan. And I also don't think that, again, Shockwave, something that has gone more important now, is coordinating your usages of the shockwaves. Now, they could also fix this with dungeon design. If we had pulls like this Triple Thunderer pull in the Rookery, and we looked at these mobs and we were like, okay, we are going to reduce the damage of Lightning Bolt. We're going to increase the cast time of Lightning Bolt. We're going to put a cooldown on Lightning Bolt so that the mobs don't chain cast it at you, and we're going to make that cooldown longer. Those would be ways that maybe this could work with the kick change. But if you're going to make packs like this, I think that it used to be gameplay that you'd go into a pack like this and be like, okay, I'll stop this kick, right? And you hit the mob with a kick or a stop, and a stun, right? Or anything like that, a stun, a disorient, anything like that would count as a stop, and that would be great. And if you were doing it in a pug situation as well, you could roll up to a pack like this and you could be like, I'm going to be helpful. I'm going to press my shockwave button. Now if you go into a pug run like this and you hit your shockwave button there and your mage hits kick at the same time, you've actually griefed. You always had griefed a little bit because you'd use 2 resources when you only need 1. But now if my shockwave hits the mob before my mage's counterspell hits the mob, it's actually going to not be locked out and it's just going to start casting again right out of there. So the premium on really technical coordination of your group in a not particularly fun way has gone up. Something that, if you look at Blizzard's desire to remove our ability to track each other's cooldowns, that philosophy is entirely at odds with doing this sort of juggling of mobs casts with AoE stops, the way that it works in this post-change world. So they should either revert this change, dramatically nuke how often there are mobs like this that spam Lightning Bolt at you. That's another option. And then regardless, they should look at it and they should be like, do we really want to make Solar Beam and Sigil of Silence be the only abilities in the game, and I guess Disrupting Shout, that actually work the way that everything used to? When we look at the meta this season and we see Vengeance Demon Hunters and Moonkins everywhere, there's a lot of good reasons for that, but it certainly doesn't help that Solar Beam and Sigil of Silence actually work on these things in a way that's fun. And I think that's the big thing, is when you think about doing keys, it's fun that I can hit Stormbolt on a mob and be like, no, I'm stopping you from doing your thing. And then the Stormbolt finishes and I've succeeded against that. And turning that instead into like a 3-second, pushing that problem down into the future makes the pull a lot less fun and a lot more stressful. So I think that it's one of those classic Blizzard changes that you look at it and you're like, yeah, this makes sense. But also, despite it making sense, it's making the game less fun. Like, there's a lot of logic, a lot of lines that they can write about why it's supposed to be more fun this way, but just, at least in my experience, it's less fun to play the game that way. Up next.
And that's one of the things that I feel that when they start putting all of that into effect, when the devs and Blizz start limiting the kicks and the stuns and everything like that, and then they started adding a lot more mobs that were casting. And not only that, but they have mobs in these, like the Rookery, that you need to make sure that you hit, and I use platers, so you see the red going across, and you need to make sure you're gonna kick that, and then somebody whiffs it, and down goes Billy because he just got targeted and hit, and because nobody kicked that, or their kicks were down because you doubled up. Now as a rep pally, I have 3 stops. I have my stun, I have my blinding light, and I have my kick. All right. Now the first 2, which is my stun, I'll lock him down for a little bit, but he'll still be able to cast the minute he comes off of that stun. My blinding light gives you just a few seconds to maybe have counter go down a little bit more for your kick, and that's how I use mine. For instance, in Pyre, I always go after the priest because I want to make sure they're not healing the rest of the mobs. When there's 2 priests, I'll try and coordinate if we have comms to make sure that they're going to be, we offset and we get on 2 different priests, so we're not overlapping our kicks, which usually works out really, really well. But then you still have to worry about the conjurers, still have to worry about the mages. Who's going to get all of those? And hopefully your group can do that because they've thrown more casters than are usual in these mob pools.
The Death Knight raid buff situation. Why doesn't Death Knight have a raid buff? Well, maybe it's because Death Grip is a really powerful effect that we consider to be basically the Death Knight raid buff. Okay, if that's the case, why don't we design any fights where Death Grip is good? We have a fight called Mugsy where we're spawning these ads from the Goblin Guided Rocket, and these things aren't Death Grippable. We have Gallywix Mythic where these ads spawn, and they spawn already exactly all grouped up where you want them to be. No need for Death Grip, no need for Mass Grip. So what's the point? Where are people gonna play Death Knights in Mythic Raid? They're not. They're not playing any of them. Maybe you're going to play them on a fight like Styx Bunk Junker. You're going to have your tank swap over to Blood DK. But you're just not seeing Death Knights played on these fights in the raid, and you're not going to in any tier unless they either A, design a fight so that Death Grip is good. Now, it doesn't have to be OP, but at least doing something like, honestly, making the Volunteer Rocketeer Death Gripable is a huge thing. Like, why is that not true? You just have a mob that casts Disintegration Beam, does a lot of damage on somebody. It's not the end of the world. Everybody deals with it because it's unCCable. But if an argument for playing DK was, oh, right, we can just grip this under boss and kill it down, at least you'd be thinking, it's nice that I have a Death Knight in my raid. I would like to add a Death Knight to my raid. But as it stands right now with the design of these bosses, there's no reason for you to be like, oh yeah, I want to have a DK in my raid. I mean, I guess AMZ is good, but almost every class these days has something like that, right? Like Zephyr, Mass Barrier, something create Time Spiral, right? All these different effects that everybody has, Rallying Cry, Darkness, right? That are all on a similar power level to Anti-Magic Zone, depending on the fight, depending on whether it's physical damage or not, which in a lot of cases it is. So either give Death Knight a raid buff. At this point, everybody else has got one. Let's give Death Knight one. Or design fights that, intentionally to make it so that people will think, I would like a Death Knight for this. And do that consistently for bosses in these raids, for end bosses, second to last bosses in raids, because otherwise Death Knight gets relegated to being the spot where if you're in a top guild and you're the Death Knight main, every 6 months you're just flipping a coin between whether you get a vacation or whether you're actually getting to progress the raid. Our next one is
and I agree with that, and this is one of the things that's always working with about your meta, even when we're talking about Mythic Plus. We talked about the stops and what classes are now they have more ability to stop. We talk about classes that have the ability of uncapped AoE. We talk about raid, where you bring certain classes because they can do certain things better than others. It really needs to be harmonized. They need to give it to every class, is kind of what I'm saying. Maybe for Blood DK, you can give that tank a lust, so that if you're in Mythic Plus, you can turn around and not have to give a spot that you could give to a friend, but you can't because they're not playing a lust class, and you don't want to use drums because now you're doing 15s and you really need that lust instead of bringing your friend. If it's a feel bad moment, it's not really one of those moments that I think that we want Blizz to be doing when it comes to giving us the ability to play with our friends, and it just needs to be updated. I know that they're doing better about trying to make sure that everybody has a piece of the pie, but they've got to break the meta. Why does the meta always exist? Because there are these AoE uncapped, they are these stun things, these are these lust things. It's just really something they need to look at. And why are they not paying attention to the groups and looking at the same thing that everyone else looks at, which is the Raider.io page, and say, why does this meta exist? What are they bringing? And this is what everyone is learning about how to build their groups around so they have a successful key. That's my view on it.
Small rant, but what's going on with the reps in Undermine? They doubled the rate that you achieve reputation with these guys, and I do a decent amount of stuff. Like, I've been doing my 3 weeklies every week, but if you actually want to farm a bunch of, like, if you want to get exalted with all 4 of these cartels, not to mention the 5th cartel, which isn't even shown here, that requires so much gaming, so much doing of these, like turning in chat lists to the cartels instead of to the machine, and doing these world quests that are giving 300 rep each, the side quests that are giving 200 each, with the old reputation system where you need to get like 40,000 rep to get all the way up to exalted with these reps. And these ones, for the first time, actually have Paragon rep rewards, which, makes sense because the Paragon rewards for these other reputations just have nothing in them, right? It's like 1 Radiant Echo and then 2 potions or something like that. But it's weird because it feels like these Paragon reps are ones where you actually can fill out the Paragon a few times pretty easily. You just do some normal stuff, normal weekly reset stuff, and you can get a decent amount of progress towards these Paragon reps. And then the Cartels of Undermine ones are much more cringe, and also I got Bilgewater to Exalted. I don't want to keep choosing Bilgewater now because I want to get all the others to Exalted. And that one actually, now these ones actually do have mounts behind Paragon, so this is a small deal. But it is still very confusing to me. I can see myself coming back to Undermine, even long beyond 10.2, not because I really want to, but just because this is by far the least painful way to get rep, is just doing these 3 weeklies. They give 2,000 rep each, and then, not touching the side gigs that give 200 each, and trying to farm up these, the farmable sources or the world quests that only give 300, and that just seems a little off to me. That seems like a small thing that just doesn't make much sense about this patch, especially when you factor in the fact that they literally doubled the rep income for all these reps, and it's still this slow and weird. I feel like, side gigs should be giving 1,000 each, not 200, something like that.
I find that trying to farm all the rep is something that I've gotten away from because it just does take that long. It takes that long. There's nothing very valuable behind them besides the point that you could say you did it. And for me, I don't give a shit about that. It would be nice though if, for instance, as the higher you get with that cartel, instead of using the lesser crest, how about you start upping the crest, either given the rep given, or you go to a different crest and you get, okay, now you get rune crest, or maybe now you get exalted crest based on the level that you've gotten with them. That would be a great way for Blizz to try and keep a lot of the world quest even more valuable, something that you want to do. If you look at a world quest at the very beginning of every expansion, you usually go do them because they have a benefit for currency, gear, and also the rep. How about whenever you start getting to the higher levels, they give you more of all of those. They might give you more valor stones. They'll give you rune instead of weathered. They'll start giving you gilded instead of rune the higher you go. They'll start giving you higher item level gear. They'll go from veteran to champion. It's nice if they could keep all of that relevant and make it to where if you're a new player, you're at the lower. If you're mid tier, you get the higher. And if you can max out that rep, then guess what? You're at the top, and you could do it just, give everybody the Paragon boxes.
All right, for my next rant, I'd like to begin with a question. Which embellishments are you wearing on your character right now? I can be reasonably confident that it's probably either Ascendance and a Writhing Armor Band, maybe Duskweave, maybe Dawnweave, maybe some prismatic focusing lenses, maybe you're some kind of cringe PvPer and they do different stuff, or just maybe you're a tank and you've got the Adrenal Surge clasp and you're feeling awfully stupid as the Delve belt is coming out soon. Those are kind of the main options. Did you know that there are a bunch of really cool different embellishments that they've got this time around? There's these set bonus ones, the Fury of the Stormrook set that you can get. There's boots, that give you speed and do holy damage after you get enough stacks of it. There's a lot of cool things here, but basically none of them are things you would ever consider actually using because the numbers on almost all of the cool embellishments this expansion just suck. Now, could there be an argument that hey, these are for casual players who don't care as much about the fact that this is simming less than, Ascendance or something? Yeah, maybe, but I feel like casual players don't really want to, deal with the problem of juggling around a 2-set, for instance. They're going to have less access to tier of their choice, so the tier that drops for them is just going to be what they're wearing, and almost all of these set bonuses are filling some of your tier slots as well. And then this look at this 2-set, right? You get a floating orb of fire pollen nearby. Stepping into the orb gathers it, increasing your highest secondary stat for 12 seconds. Up to 2 allies who step near you will also receive a little bit of a secondary stat. Now, does that effect, which is reminiscent of things like Treacherous Transmitter, right? Those sorts of things, is that kind of thing something that our more casual players will enjoy doing and be like, yeah, you know what? This does less numbers, but I'm willing to do it. Or is this the kind of effect where it's oh, maybe a high-end player will look at this and be like, yeah, I've got a fairly simple rotation. I feel like I'm in control of my rotation. I'm willing to take on this extra quest and this extra complexity now in my rotation in exchange for a small DPS increase. I think that's what would make sense for this kind of effect. So if you're going to make embellishments that suck like this one, either actually make it have some excitement value for casual players, right? Do something that have it be a lower number, but something actually really cool, the kind of thing that is exciting to casual players. Or if you're going to make it this sort of weird, fiddly, extra gameplay challenge thing, then it should actually reward you with more damage by doing that thing than, Ascendance or Duskweave or whatever, Dawnweave, any of those kind of things. or make some embellishments that are cool defensive ones, something like that. Obviously there was the Spore Cloak incident back in season 2 of Dragonflight, and Spore Cloak was super good, but maybe they don't have to be that good, but actually making it so that somebody could decide, hey, I'm a tank, I'm going to put on this Captured Starlight embellishment. I was thinking about doing it, and then I just looked at the numbers, and I was like, oh, I really can't do this. Like, I had a lot of characters where I'm just looking at it, I'm like, man, I don't really have great, strong offensive embellishment options. Yeah, let me look at this defensive one. Oh, it's just such garbage that I can't consider it. That sort of thing just makes no sense to me. So I'm just so confused about what they're doing with the embellishment system. The item level side of it as well, the fact that you have to put on a piece of gear that goes lower eye level than Myth does, and then there's the Ascendances, which go on weapons. Obviously, the fact that this only matters to players who can get access to Myth weapons, which for a lot of players, you're waiting on Vault RNG to see if you can get one of those. I get that, and I think it's nice that you can craft into these slots and replace it, but something like making your embellished slot have +3 item level so that it isn't lower eye level than what you can actually upgrade with your gear, I think would be a really nice buff to make it feel a little bit less bad, especially, dude, I know players who crafted their weapon or something, chest piece, shoulders, some big slot like that, and then they got it in their vault the next week, and it's a super feel bad because then you take that item and your craft is bricked for a few weeks. So yeah, I think having an item be embellished, give it +3 item levels, would be a really cool way to actually have it be a little bit less of a feel bad and a little bit something more you can commit to doing. And then they could nerf Ascendance or make it go on stuff that isn't just weapons, because right now it feels like Ascendance is a OP embellishment that's balanced by the fact that it goes on weapons, and therefore you're giving up potential item level on your weapons compared to a fully upgraded Myth weapon, which I think is a fine trade-off in a world maybe where there are other interesting embellishments, and then the problem is they just didn't actually make any other interesting embellishments this expansion. So yeah, I'm very confused about what the idea was with embellishments, because it feels like you go to, there's a reason why when you go to In-N-Out, their menu has 6 items on it, and it feels like this is going to In-N-Out, and their menu still has 6 items on it, but they've also randomly added 50 extra items that are just all garbage. And it's like, you're still just going to pick between these 6 ones, but what are these other ones even doing here? And the fact that there's now sushi on the menu at In-N-Out, either I'm going to accidentally try it and then, throw up and get food poisoning, or, they could actually make it good, and then there'd be sushi at In-N-Out, and that would be cool. I would eat that if it was good.
I've never been to an In-N-Out, but I understand what he's saying. And truly, the only thing that I think if you watch these videos, the only thing you do is you go to murloc.io or you go to Archon, and you look up the crafted weapons, and you see what everyone is putting out there. They've done a lot of the simming for you. You just pick that, and then you get your auction mount, and you just go ahead and buy those off the auction house, and then you just find your crafter, and you're done. You don't put any thought into it. You saw something on the page, you're gonna follow the page, and you're done. What are they doing with the rest of those? I agree. If they can make those competitive, make some for, even if they could give you a craft, for instance, of a trinket like they used to back in the day, or if they could give you the craft for your tanks that he brought up, but the numbers aren't there to support it. It definitely is something that they've done really well on, but they can do more, they can do better.
All right, next one. We are back on my Demon Hunter, because why do 90-second cooldowns not reset when the boss resets combat? They've added a bunch of tech to remove buffs from you or something like that when bosses get pulled, which is great, but they just reset 2-minute cooldowns, but not 1 minute 30-second cooldowns. So if you wipe on a boss right after you've pressed your 90-second CDs, or your 2-minute trinkets, which often don't reset as well, then all of a sudden you put up a pull timer and you're like, okay, let's do a /pull 30. And then somebody else is like, oh no, I need 50. I need a minute. And you're just like, oh, why? Why is it like this? What possible downside could there be to resetting 90-second cooldowns that doesn't already exist on resetting 2-minute cooldowns? I can't explain it. And finally, let's talk a little bit.
And would that be for, say, for instance, the same thing you could do in Mythic Plus? If you see there's a full wipe, maybe you could get your lust back. Then would that be counterintuitive, because then everybody would just wipe? Well, you can't because you still have to beat the timer. So that gauges you, and you need to try and make sure that you're not wiping. That that wipe could cost you what did they decide it was? Something like 2 minutes, you know, off of a tight timer already. And then you don't know if there could be another one down the line. You can't do that every pull. It's definitely something that would cost you. So I believe that they would need to try and fix this so that everything just resets. You know, you get a fresh pull. And I know that mostly in Rage you do, but let's try and apply that to Mythic Plus. I know they're spammable. You might be able to learn more tricks and tips, but I don't believe it's something that you could do the whole run.
A little bit about dinars. I've already talked a lot about dinars in my previous videos about the topic, so I'm not going to rant too much. In fact, I'm not going to rant at all about the, heroic myth track stuff. Suffice it to say, I disagree with that, but I didn't want to rehash that in this video. The thing I'm confused about is why isn't there a catch-up mechanic if you fall behind on dinars? So the way that it works is your first week of doing this weekly quest, you get 3 dinars. That week, so if you come and join the party late, you can do that quest, and then you can get the quest again and do it for 1 dinar and get to your 4th dinar. But aside from that, you can't do multiple dinars in a week. So right now, at the time of recording this, I'm on the week of the 5th dinar. If you haven't already started collecting your dinars now, you'll be behind anybody else who does it. You can do the first 2 weeks at the same time, but all of the future weeks are gated to be done on separate weeks than each other. Now, presumably, you're still going to be able to get to your 9 total dinars. You're just going to get there a week later than everybody else. But if somebody comes and rejoins the game, they take a couple of weeks off, and they come back in July, is it a big deal that they're going to be missing their dinar items for a little while? No, it's not a huge deal. But why, though? Why can't they just do the quest multiple times and catch up? What is the benefit of punishing those players, of punishing somebody on their alt who didn't log in?
And that's the same thing that Blizz has always done. This is just something now that is on top of the dinars. They don't want to let the players abuse whatever mechanic is out there, because it is their game, not your game. It is their game, and they get to rule this kingdom. It kind of feels like I have the power moment.
For a week on that character, and now they're going to get their dinar item later. Is it a big deal? Are they going to need that 3rd dinar item? No. Are they going to feel bad? Yes. So why do they need to feel bad? That feeling bad is a downside that should be serving a game purpose of some kind, and I don't think it is in this case. I think that there's no reason that we need to be making people feel bad. That's a similar argument to some of the other problems I have with dinars, but I think it's especially true when it comes to the fact that weekly quest isn't just repeatable up to the point where everybody else could be with it. In particular as well, too. So one of my guildies just didn't turn in the quest by accident, and now he's just behind by a week as well, and it's just such an unfortunate thing. I know there's some conspiracy theories on Reddit that are like, hey, they intentionally made the dinars suck in every possible way this season so players would stop saying they wanted them.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's what's going on here. I think this is just a case of like, hey, we didn't really think about it. Plus, we think that just getting your 1 per week is fine, and you'll eventually catch up to the cap of 9 because the cap is going to stop anybody else. So if it stops other people and doesn't stop you, you'll eventually get to the same point as them. But in practice, I think that's just not the way that people engage with these sorts of systems, and how they feel about it is going to be if anybody misses even a single week, except for randomly that first week, or that second week, which you could miss for free. But any of the other weeks, if you missed any of those other weeks, I guess it was the first week you could miss for free. If you came back on the second week, you could catch up. But anybody who's missed any of the other weeks, they are just going to feel bad, and I don't think they need to. So luckily, this is something that they can change pretty easily just by making that adjustment, and they could do it.
I think even by watching this video so late, I think I saw something, I think by Eisen, and maybe someone down in the comments can correct me. I think they are giving us some kind of catch-up. I haven't watched that video yet. That might be something that I watch next. But if you guys know that there is an update to this, and today is June 9th, let me know. Let me know. I'd like to know.
This week, next week, the week after that, and it would basically there'd be no downside. There's not yet any pain except for the psychic pain, but it's not like you could have earned your 3rd dinar yet, or your 2nd dinar yet, even at the time of recording this. So I think it would be a really good change for Blizzard to put this in this reset, a little bit of catch up for that. And then finally, the PTR. So there was an interview with Paul Cubitt and Maria Hamilton, and But Why Though? I'll put the link to the Wowhead post and the full interview down in the description below. But one of the things that happened here was discussion about various nerfs that happened, and one of the things they came up with was it would help us if we had more people on the PTR. clearly that's true. They'll just always prefer to have more people on the PTR.
I've never gone to
And
the
please
PTR.
come play PTR. And I know this has spawned a lot of kind of hate. There's been a lot of different lines of attack at Blizzard over this line. One of those is like, hey, you fired your whole QA department, and now you're trying to get us to come test your game for free, which I'm certainly somewhat sympathetic to.
And not really for free, because we pay. So you're paying them to play test their technology, their game. It's a feel bad moment. I'm not going to lie.
That one, although I wouldn't say they fired their whole QA department or anything, but there have been, widespread reports of various QA testers getting laid off. Although I would imagine that in a lot of cases those decisions aren't being made by the devs, and in a lot of cases the devs that are saying this are the same people that would not have chosen to fire or lay off or stop contracting with these various QA places. The other one is, hey, we test a lot of PTR and we report these bugs and they go unfixed. And obviously that's a hard problem for Blizzard to fix, right? To some extent, they're going to get 60,000 reports every PTR, and it's a very hard job of filtering through those. And on the one hand, they're trying, you think about like, oh man, my class has had this bugged interaction where if I press Shaylun's gift twice, it does a lot more healing. But that doesn't break the game in the way that, the problem with, say, the Nightfall scenario at the start of patch 11.1.5 was just literally broken if there were more than like 5 people in the shard trying to do it for the first week of that. That's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, this is game breaking, obviously, for a part of the game that a lot of high-end players consider irrelevant, which is outdoor world content. They would instead consider the class bugs and stuff to be more important, but those are less like game breaking, right? And so Blizzard would really like people to come and test the PTR, especially for stuff like stress testing things, like the Nightfall scenario, right? But even stuff like the class bugs, I think that there's definitely a lot of upside on Blizzard's end if you go into like every single class Discord, there's usually a list or like a pinned comment in one of these channels that's like, hey, here's all the known bugs with our spec. Is it true that Blizzard is probably pretty aware of most of these and they're just lower priority or, hard things to fix? Maybe, but certainly fixing those I think would help players feel like their PTR testing was more important. And reporting bugs with upcoming content is something where very often we will know about the bugs that are going to be in the game for quite a long time during the PTR testing. But I don't really want to complain too much about that because I feel like that's just natural, like, live service game prioritization of your very limited resources that they have. Obviously, a lot of us can be looking at this and be like, well, they're a $7 trillion company, and...
Exactly. I mean, we always want to try and side with the developers and know that they have a hard task at hand because it is such a big game, and there are so many codes that go into the game. If you look at any piece of your area, you look out, you look out across Dornegal and you look at all of that great graphic that's all code, that is all code. And as you're flying now, they have to interact your code with that existing code and the perception. Just that alone, I would be excited to make work. Now there's other things when you start throwing on all your spell abilities and then you counteract with any mobs, their spell abilities. It's got to be a daunting task, I'm sure. And you look at the budget that they have and the experience that they've had, you would expect something like the Nightfall event not to be broken in the way that it was. One of the things that I've started doing is when those events come out, I don't do them for a week or two because I kind of know they're going to be, number one, a lot of lag because new content draws new players and they want to go and try it out, which you're going to have that come across your screen as bits and pieces of it loading into your PC. Like, oh my God, I can't even move. All right, so then I wait for a couple weeks, and then I start seeing all the videos or all the podcasts going off. How broken this event is and how they can't even do anything in it, and how they keep getting DC'd and logged out because the game is literally kicking you out. And then let's not even talk about the login boss. You try logging back in only to find a black screen and saying your character is already logged in or doesn't exist. Just things. I've noticed that ever since this, I believe it was 11.1.5, my computer has been crashing more. My computer is a very good computer and it's crashing and kicking me out of the game. Just kicking my computer offline, making it restart. It's unbelievable.
They can't afford to spend $30 more on another QA tester or whatever. Obviously, those numbers are not real, but people make those sorts of arguments. But I'm very sympathetic to the idea that, Blizzard is going to try and do more with less, right? And certain types of non-game breaking bugs existing is to be expected. If they want more people to come play PTR, though, they could do something, and this would be, like, in particular, if they want stuff like Nightfall to get stress tested more, they could give us a reason to do so beyond just helping out the multi-million-dollar company out of the goodness of our heart, or being a content creator. That's another reason that people actually go do this, is some of the big content creators will go and actually try and get footage of this for their videos or whatever. But aside from that, why would some normal person who's playing World of Warcraft be like, hey, do I want to log in and play WoW? Or do I want to go test the Nightfall scenario, which I'm going to want to do exactly the same amount of times so that I can get the Flames Radiance rep that's the reward I care about when it actually comes out? So do I just want to do it an extra time without those rewards? No. But what if Blizzard put a reward there? There are rewards that Blizzard gives you that incentivize you to, like, go do MDI time trials. You get a banner for doing that. That's really sick. What if there were just banners for doing a certain amount of PTR testing each cycle around? Now, is that something where me saying that is making certain collectors wince because they're like, oh no, then I would actually go do PTR and not enjoy it? Yeah, maybe, but at least Blizzard would accomplish the objective of getting enough people to maybe stress test these things that otherwise are going untested and then launching in a truly game-breaking that's kind of damaging to the more casual player base, which, as always, is a very important part of the player base that often gets missed, especially in discussions from high-end players and
One of the things they could do if they want to have more PTR players come, give them the one appearance, maybe, because since they're going with a lot of cosmetics, give them the one appearance that is a set. And that set that they get from top to bottom will designate that you put so many hours into their PTR and help test so many and put in so many reports for bugs. Make it a game of its own. You could have one guy said, I was in paid PTR, I didn't get that. And they're like, because you didn't play enough PTR. I hit this number and just making an arbitrary number of this or that, and they get a mount or they get a cosmetic set. Make it a set. And then the player will start chasing that set. I guarantee you.
Content creators such as myself, maybe that would be worth doing. I don't know. Just a thought on the come play PTR thing. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Again, all these things are said from a place of I really like this game, and I think there's some low-hanging fruit that they can fix to make this game a lot better, but I think it's already in a really good place in a lot of ways. The raids, the dungeons recently have been great. I've been having a lot of fun this expansion, so a lot of these are nitpicks, but that's my job. I'm gonna nitpick. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know what things I've missed down in the comments below. See you in the next one. Bye.
And I find that to be, these are not bad. These are not bad. I think they can fix these very easily. I think they are things that we want as a community to have updated in the game. Get rid of all these cap locks for let's say 11.2. Let's have no cap lock on. Let's have no Valor Stones anymore. Let's get rid of those. Let's make it so that when you're doing those world quests now for 11.2, let's make all of those world quests go up by tier the more rep that you grind, so that they stay more valuable to the player that's doing them. And you're asking us to do them, because when you get your weekly and you have that one that says 10 world quests, let's make that something that people really want to do and not feel like it's a chore that we need to do it. If you've stayed around this long in the video, I want to say thank you very much. I stream on Twitch at twitch/Achilles_1970 every Monday through Saturday, where Monday through Friday, we usually do Mythic Plus and Raid. And then when we turn around on Saturday, we like to take a break and go to the club and sing, and I'll do some karaoke. I've been doing some shorts and putting those, and everybody gets to see my bad and horrible take on songs. But other than that, I appreciate you guys for being here. And until next time, take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.